The rain fell in sheets across South Philadelphia, turning the cracked pavement into rivers of reflected neon. Baek Jun-seok sat motionless in his black Mercedes, eyes tracking the darkened windows of the building across the street. Business. Always business. The meeting could wait until morning, but he preferred to remind people that his family empire never slept. Then she appeared. A child, no more than 8 years old, stumbling down the exterior stairs in bare feet. Her oversized t-shirt clung to her small frame, soaked through in seconds. She looked left, then right, panic written across her face in the amber glow of the streetlight. Jun-seok's hand moved to the ignition, not his concern. He'd built his reputation on knowing exactly where the lines were drawn, and a desperate child in the rain was firmly on the other side of every single one. But she was running toward him now, her small fists pounding against his window. "Sir," her voice cracked with fear. "Sir, please. My mother isn't waking up." His hand froze. Those words. That terror. He knew them intimately. Jun-seok stared at the child through the rain-streaked glass. Water dripped from her hair, plastered in tight curls against her scalp. Her eyes, wide brown, desperate, bore into him with an intensity that unsettled something he'd kept carefully locked away for 39 years. He should drive away. Every instinct honed through 2 decades of running his family's Philadelphia business empire screamed at him to leave. This wasn't his world. This child, this building, this poverty-stricken corner of South Philly where broken streetlights outnumbered working ones, none of it concerned him. "Please," she whispered, and the word shattered against his window like glass. Jun-seok's jaw tightened. His fingers drummed once against the steering wheel, then stilled. When he opened the door, the child stumbled backward, and he caught a glimpse of her face in the dome light. Terror, hope. They warred across her features with brutal honesty. "Show me," he said in English, his accent barely perceptible. She grabbed his hand, her small fingers cold and trembling, and pulled him toward the building. He followed, his $2,000 Italian shoes splashing through puddles that smelled of motor oil and desperation. The building's entrance hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the stairwell reeked of mildew and neglect. "Third floor?" the girl panted, taking the stairs 2 at a time. "Apartment 3C. I tried to wake her, but she won't. She won't." The apartment door stood open. Jun-seok's instinct was to assess the situation before entering. Years of careful training made it automatic. No threat. Just poverty, stark and unforgiving. The living room was barely larger than his walk-in closet. A couch that had seen better decades. A small television on a plastic crate. Books stacked everywhere. Library books, he noted. The kind you borrowed when you couldn't afford to own. And on the couch a woman lay unconscious, her breathing labored. Jun-seok crossed the room in 3 strides. His fingers found her pulse, weak, irregular. He tilted her head back slightly, noting the pallor of her skin. "How long has she been like this?" He pulled out his phone. I don't know. I fell asleep watching TV. When I woke up, she wouldn't answer me." The girl's voice trembled. Is she dying?" "Not if I can help it." Jun-seok dialed, his Korean rapid and precise. "I need an ambulance. 3rd and Morris, building with the blue door. 3rd floor, apartment 3C. Unconscious female, approximately mid-30s, needs immediate medical attention. No, I'll stay until they arrive." He ended the call and looked at the child properly for the first time. She stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, shivering in her wet clothes. 8 years old, maybe 9. Too thin. Her eyes tracked his every movement with the wariness of someone who'd learned early that the world wasn't safe. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping his voice level. Iris Coleman." She took a tentative step forward. "That's my mama, Mireya Coleman. She's sick, her heart, but we can't afford the medicine anymore." Something cold settled in Jun-seok's chest. He knew that reality, the brutal mathematics of American healthcare, where money determined who lived and who suffered. He'd seen it destroy families in Koreatown, watched his own uncle die because pride kept him from asking for help. He shrugged off his jacket and draped it over Iris's shoulders, It swallowed her completely, the sleeves hanging past her hands. She looked up at him with such raw gratitude that he had to look away. "The ambulance will be here soon," he said, moving back to Mireya's side. He adjusted her position slightly, elevating her legs. Medical training from a lifetime ago, before he'd chosen a different path. "Will they make her better?" Iris crept closer, her small hand gripping the edge of his now wet sleeve. "They'll stabilize her, take her to the hospital." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What happens after depends on many things." "We don't have insurance," Iris whispered. "Mama says we have Medicaid, but it doesn't cover everything. She stopped taking some of her medicines last month, said we needed the money for food." Junseok's hands stilled. He'd made a career of reading people, of understanding what they needed and what they feared. But this child's honesty, this casual confession of the choice between medicine and eating, it hit differently than he'd expected. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Iris flinched at the sound, and Junseok realized she was still holding onto his sleeve, her knuckles white with the strength of her grip. "They'll help her," he said, and was surprised to find he meant it. The paramedics arrived with professional efficiency. Questions, vitals, a stretcher. Junseok stepped back, becoming a shadow in the corner while they worked. He watched Iris answer their questions with a composure that made his chest ache. Yes, her mother had a heart condition. No, she didn't know all the medication names, but she could show them the bottles. No, there was no one else to call, just her and her mama. "We're taking her to Presbyterian," the lead paramedic said, glancing at Iris. "Kid, you got anyone who can—" "I'll take her," Junseok heard himself say. 3 heads turned toward him. He straightened, his voice taking on the authority that commanded rooms and closed deals. "I'm a family friend. They'll bring her to the hospital." The paramedic's eyes narrowed slightly, taking in Junseok's expensive watch, his tailored clothes, the contrast between him and this shabby apartment. But Iris nodded, and that seemed to settle it. As they prepared to transport Mireya, Iris grabbed Junseok's hand again. Her voice was barely audible over the commotion. "Thank you for not driving away." Junseok looked down at her. This child who'd shattered his carefully maintained distance with nothing but desperate honesty. He'd crossed a line tonight, he knew. The question was how far he'd let himself go. "Let's go to her," he said quietly, and led Iris Coleman out into the rain. Presbyterian Hospital's emergency room hummed with controlled chaos. Junseok sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, Iris curled against his side, her breathing finally steady after an hour of silent tears. His jacket still draped over her shoulders, now dry but carrying the faint scent of the apartment, poverty and lavender laundry detergent. His phone buzzed for the 17th time, Kwon Sung-ho, his right hand in the family business, demanding updates on the scheduled meeting. Junseok silenced it without reading the message. The meeting could wait. Everything could wait. "Mr. Coleman?" A doctor approached, clipboard in hand, exhaustion etched into the lines around her eyes. "No." Junseok stood, Iris immediately scrambling to her feet beside him. "I'm a family friend. This is her daughter, Iris." "Doctor." Mitchell's gaze shifted to the child. Her expression softened. "Your mother is stable. We've got her on medication to help her heart, and we're running tests to determine what triggered this episode." "Can I see her?" Iris's voice was small but determined. "In a bit. She's resting now." Dr. Mitchell crouched to Iris's level. "Honey, your mom told me she stopped taking her medication last month. Do you know why?" Iris's fingers twisted in the hem of Junseok's jacket. "It cost too much. She said we couldn't afford it, and food." The doctor's jaw tightened. She stood, addressing Junseok directly. "Ms. Coleman has a serious heart condition. Without consistent medication and monitoring, her situation could deteriorate rapidly. She needs ongoing treatment, regular cardiology appointments, and likely a specialized care program. We're talking 15 to 20,000 a year minimum, even with assistance programs." Junseok felt Iris's hand slip into his, her small fingers gripping tight. 20,000. He'd spent more than that on a watch. The absurdity of it made his chest constrict. What if cost wasn't a concern? The words left his mouth before conscious thought caught up. Dr. Mitchell blinked. "Then we could actually treat her properly, but cost is always a concern for patients in Ms. Coleman's situation. Medicaid helps, but there are gaps and—" "Make a list," Jun Seok pulled out his phone. Everything she needs, every medication, every appointment, every test, I'll handle it. Silence stretched between them. Dr. Mitchell's gaze moved from Jun Seok to Iris and back again, calculation and suspicion warring with hope. That's very generous, Mr. Beck. And it's not generosity. It's necessity. He looked down at Iris, whose eyes had gone wide. This child shouldn't have to choose between feeding her mother and medicating her. 20 minutes later, Dr. Mitchell returned with a treatment plan that read like a luxury car payment schedule. Jun Seok scanned it once, then forwarded it to his accountant with a single instruction. Handle this, quietly. You can see her now, Dr. Mitchell said to Iris. Room 247. Just remember she needs rest. Iris started toward the hallway, then stopped and turned back. She wrapped her arms around Jun Seok's waist, her face pressed against his chest. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. He stood frozen, hands hovering awkwardly above her shoulders. When was the last time someone had hugged him without wanting something? When was the last time physical contact meant gratitude instead of manipulation or strategy? Slowly, carefully, he let his hands settle on her back. Go see your mother. When Iris disappeared down the corridor, Jun Seok sank back into the plastic chair. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was his father. Where are you? Baek Min-jun's voice carried the weight of 40 years leading their family empire. Sung-ho says you disappeared for a hospital emergency. What happened? Nothing that concerns the family business. Jun Seok kept his voice neutral, a skill perfected over decades. Everything you do concerns our family. Are you hurt? No. Then whose emergency pulled you away from our obligations? Jun Seok closed his eyes. His father would find out eventually. The accountant would mention the medical payments, or Sung-ho would investigate, or one of their contacts at the hospital would talk. Better to control the narrative. A child asked me for help. Her mother needed medical attention. Static silence. Then, Korean. No. More silence. When his father spoke again, ice crystallized in every syllable. You stopped important business for an outsider's medical emergency? I stopped because a child was terrified and alone. And now? Did you call social services, handle it properly? Jun Seok's grip tightened on his phone. I'm handling it my way. Your way? His father's laugh held no humor. You forget who you are, Jun Seok. We help our own. That's what builds loyalty, what maintains respect. Charity to outsiders weakens our position. Then I'm weak. The words tasted like rebellion. You're my son. You're the heir to everything I've built. You don't get to be weak. A pause. Come home. We need to discuss this. The line went dead. Jun Seok sat in the fluorescent glow of the waiting room, surrounded by other people's emergencies, other people's fears. He'd built his life on clear boundaries, us and them, Korean and other family and outsiders. Those boundaries had kept him safe, kept him powerful, kept him from the vulnerability that destroyed men in his position. Iris appeared at the end of the hallway, Dr. Mitchell's hand on her shoulder. Even from a distance, he could see the relief on her face, the way her shoulders had finally dropped from their defensive hunch. She ran to him, and this time he didn't hesitate. He caught her, lifting her slightly as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Mama's awake, she breathed against his shoulder. She wants to thank you. Jun Seok set her down gently. Every instinct screamed at him to leave now, to draw the line before it blurred further. He'd paid for treatment. That was enough, more than enough. But Iris's hand found his again, tugging him toward room 247, and he found himself following. Some boundaries, it seemed, were easier to draw than to maintain. Mireya Coleman looked smaller in the hospital bed, swallowed by white sheets, and connected to machines that beeped softly in the quiet room. But her eyes, deep brown and sharp despite her exhaustion, tracked Jun Seok with the same wariness he'd seen in her daughter. Mama, this is Mr. Beck, Iris said, climbing carefully onto the edge of the bed. He's the one who helped us. He called the ambulance and everything. Mireya's gaze never left Jun Seok's face. Thank you, she said, her voice hoarse but steady. Dr. Mitchell told me that you've arranged to cover my treatment. It was necessary. Jun Seok remained near the door, hands in his pockets. Professional distance. Your daughter needed help. I provided it. Why? Direct. No pretense, he respected that. Does it matter? Yes. Mireia shifted slightly, wincing. In my experience, people who help like this want something. I need to know what you want, Mr. Beck, because I can't afford to owe the wrong kind of debt. Smart woman. Jun Seok studied her, the pride in her lifted chin despite her vulnerable position, the protective way she kept one hand on Iris's arm. She understood power dynamics, understood that generosity often came with strings. I want nothing from you, he said finally. Consider it a gift with no strings. There are always strings. Mireia's expression softened slightly. But I'm also not stupid enough to refuse help that keeps me alive for my daughter. So thank you, Mr. Beck. Truly. I just need you to know that I see this for what it is. Generosity I don't understand and can't repay. You're not meant to repay it. Jun Seok pulled out a business card, setting it on the bedside table. This is my accountant's number. He'll coordinate with the hospital billing department. You won't see any charges. Just like that? Skepticism colored her tone. Just like that. Iris looked between them, sensing the tension. Mr. Beck saved you, Mama. He was sitting in his car, and I knocked on his window and he could have driven away, but he didn't. Mireia's hand moved to cup her daughter's face. I know, baby, and I'm grateful. Her eyes met Jun Seok's again, more grateful than I can express. The moment stretched, uncomfortable in its sincerity. Jun Seok cleared his throat. You should rest. I'll arrange transportation home for Iris. She can stay with Mrs. Rodriguez across the hall, Mireia said quickly. I already texted her. She's expecting Iris. I'll take her. The offer came automatically, and Jun Seok saw Mireia's hesitation. I'll ensure she arrives safely and is settled. You have my word. After a long moment, Mireia nodded. Iris, you listen to Mr. Bayek, understand? And thank him properly. The drive back to South Philly was quiet. Iris sat in the passenger seat, dwarfed by the leather interior, her hands folded carefully in her lap. Jun Seok noticed she kept touching things lightly, the dashboard, the window control, the soft fabric, with a kind of reverence that made his throat tight. Is this your car? She asked finally. Yes. It's really nice. It smells new. It is new. He'd bought it 6 months ago. $40,000 that meant nothing, signified nothing beyond status. We used to have a car, Iris said softly. A Honda. But Mama had to sell it when she got too sick to work. Now we take the bus everywhere. Jun Seok said nothing. What could he say? That he owned 3 cars and rarely drove any of them? That his watch cost more than their yearly rent? Mr. Bake? Iris's voice was hesitant. Why did you help us? Mama's right. People don't usually help like that. He considered lying. Considered feeding her something simple and comfortable, but she deserved better than comfortable lies. I don't know, he admitted. You asked. I couldn't say no, but you could have. Lots of people would have. Yes, they would have. He pulled up to her building, the same broken entrance mocking him in the early morning light. But I'm not them. Mrs. Rodriguez met them at apartment 3B, a round-faced woman with warm eyes and flour on her apron. She took one look at Jun Seok, and her expression shifted. Recognition, perhaps, or just the instinct that knew when someone didn't belong. Iris, Misha, come here, she said, her accent thick with concern. Your mama okay? She's going to be fine, Iris said, hugging the woman. Mr. Beck helped us. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed at Jun Seok. That so? And what does Mr. Beck want in return? Nothing. Jun Seok handed Iris a second business card. This is my personal number. If there's an emergency, any emergency, you call me, day or night. Iris took the card like it was made of gold. Really? Really? He looked at Mrs. Rodriguez. I'm covering Ms. Coleman's medical expenses. If Iris needs anything while her mother is hospitalized, you call that number. Food, clothing, school supplies, anything. Mrs. Rodriguez's suspicion deepened, but she nodded slowly. We'll see. Back in his car, Jun Seok sat in the pre-dawn darkness, watching the building. Somewhere up there, a child who'd shattered his carefully constructed walls was probably already asleep, trusting him in a way no one in his real life did. His phone buzzed. His father. Family dinner. Tonight. Not optional. Jun Seok started the engine. He'd crossed from observer to participant the moment he'd stepped into that apartment. Now he'd have to face the consequences. The sun rose over Philadelphia, painting the broken streets in gold. For the first time in 20 years, Jun Seok drove toward his family home in Koreatown, with genuine dread settling in his chest. Some debts, he was learning, couldn't be paid in money. The Bayek family estate sat in the heart of Philadelphia's Koreatown like a fortress, all stone walls and traditional Korean architecture, modified for American weather. Jun Seok had grown up within these walls, learning that honor meant loyalty to blood above all else, that strength came from maintaining tradition, that outsiders were useful only when they served family interests. He pulled through the gate at 7 p.m., his tie already feeling like a noose. His father waited in the formal dining room, seated at the head of a table that could seat 20, but currently held only 5. His parents, his younger sister Ji-woo, and Kwon Sung-ho, who avoided Jun Seok's gaze. "You told him," Jun Seok said to Sung-ho, not bothering with preamble. "I had to." Sung-ho's voice was apologetic but firm. "You disappeared for 8 hours. I thought something had happened." "Sit." Baek Min-jun gestured to the chair opposite him. "We have much to discuss." Jun Seok sat. His mother, Park Soo-ah, served tea with practiced grace, her movements betraying nothing. Ji-woo watched everything with sharp eyes. She was 28, American-born, caught between tradition and rebellion in a way Jun Seok had never allowed himself to be. "Sung-ho tells me you spent the night at a hospital," his father began, his Korean formal and cold, "with a woman and child from outside our community. That you've committed to paying her medical expenses indefinitely." "Yes," Jun Seok met his father's gaze without flinching. "Explain." "A child asked for help. I provided it." "You're not a charity." Min-jun's teacup clicked against its saucer with controlled precision. "You're the heir to everything our family has built. Every action you take reflects on this family, on our standing in the community. What message does it send when you waste resources on strangers?" "It sends the message that we have compassion." The words came out sharper than intended. His father's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped. "Compassion is a luxury we can't afford in our position. You know this. I raised you to know this. You raised me to understand influence and respect," Jun Seok countered, "both of which require knowing when to show strength and when to show mercy. Mercy to our people, not to strangers who have no connection to us, no ability to contribute to our community, no value to our interests." Min-jun leaned forward. "This woman, what's her name?" "That's irrelevant." "Her name, Jun Seok." "Mireya Coleman." Each syllable felt like a line in the sand. "And her child?" "Iris, 8 years old, terrified, alone." Jun Seok's hands remained steady on the table. "She came to me because her mother was unconscious, and I was the only option she had. Would you have preferred I drive away?" "Yes." His father's answer came without hesitation. "Because now you've created an obligation. Now you're responsible for them. In their eyes and in the eyes of anyone watching, you've made yourself vulnerable." "I'm not vulnerable." "You are." His mother spoke for the first time, her voice soft but devastating. "Because they can be used against you now. Because rivals will see this connection and exploit it. Because you've shown that these people matter to you. And in our world, what matters can be destroyed." Jun Seok's jaw tightened. She was right, and they both knew it. "End it," his father said simply. "Pay what you've already committed, then sever all contact. Make it clean." "No." The word hung in the air like a thrown knife. Ji-woo inhaled sharply. Sung-ho shifted in his seat. Sua's eyes closed briefly, as if in pain. "No?" Min-jun's voice remained level, but fury simmered beneath. "You dare refuse me? I dare question whether the path you've chosen is the only one." Jun Seok stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You taught me that power comes from loyalty and respect. But maybe power could also come from being the kind of man who doesn't abandon a child in the rain." "Sentiment," his father spat the word. "This is what happens when you spend too much time outside our circle. You forget who you are." "I know exactly who I am. I'm the man who built 3 new revenue streams this year, who maintained peace with competing interests, who expanded our influence without conflict. I'm also the man who helped a struggling woman and her daughter, Those things don't contradict. They do when the people you help come from outside our community, Minjun said flatly. When they don't share our heritage, our values, our understanding of loyalty. Silence crashed through the room. Jiwoo stood abruptly. Abeoji, that's not— Sit down, their father commanded, and she sat, but her eyes blazed with something Jun Seok recognized. Shame. Is that what this is really about? Jun Seok kept his voice steady. Not about outsiders or vulnerability, but about maintaining some artificial boundary that says we can't care about people who don't look like us or come from our background. It's about maintaining our culture, our identity, Minjun said. We came to this country with nothing. We built our position to protect our people, to give them power in a system designed to exclude us. We don't dilute that by extending ourselves to those who have no stake in our success. Maybe our success means nothing if we can't extend compassion beyond our own circle, Jun Seok said quietly. Maybe the boundaries you've drawn are the real weakness. His father stood, matching his height. You were raised to honor tradition, to prioritize family above all else. That's our legacy, our strength. I was raised to value loyalty and family. Well, maybe family can be more than blood. Jun Seok stepped back from the table. I'm not ending my support for Mireya and Iris Coleman. If that makes me weak in your eyes, so be it. If you continue, his mother said quietly, there will be consequences. There are always consequences. Jun Seok headed for the door. I'm willing to face them. Behind him, his father's voice carried a finality that made his spine stiffen. Then you'd better be prepared to choose. 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Mireya came home from the hospital stronger than she'd been in years, her medications properly managed, her color returning. Dr. Mitchell called it remarkable, how quickly a body could heal when given what it needed. Jun Seok visited twice a week, always in the evening, always bringing something practical. Groceries, books Iris mentioned wanting, a space heater when November turned bitter. He never stayed long, never crossed the threshold beyond the small living room, never allowed the visits to become anything more than a benefactor checking on an investment. But Iris had other ideas. She met him at the door each time with that bright, unfettered joy that children possessed before the world taught them to guard their hearts. She showed him her homework, told him stories about school, asked him questions about Korea that made him remember parts of himself he'd forgotten existed. Mireya watched it all with careful eyes, offering tea he rarely accepted, gratitude he deflected, and a knowing look that suggested she saw far more than he was comfortable revealing. You don't have to keep coming, she said one evening, as Iris retrieved a drawing she'd made for him. The payments are automated now. You've done more than enough. I know. Jun Seok remained standing, as always, near the door. She likes the visits. And you? He met Mireya's gaze. In 3 weeks, she'd transformed from the woman unconscious on the couch into something formidable, strength wrapped in dignity, pride that refused to be diminished by circumstance. He respected her more than most people in his business world. I find them— He searched for the right word. Clarifying. Clarifying how? Before he could answer, Iris bounded back with her drawing, a crayon rendering of a man in a black car, a little girl knocking on the window, and above it all a rainbow. She titled it, The Night Everything Changed. For you, she announced, pressing it into his hands. So you remember? I could never forget, he said quietly, and meant it. His phone buzzed. Sung-ho. We have a situation. Come now. Jun Seok's expression must have shifted because Mireya stood immediately. You need to go. Yes. He looked at Iris. Thank you for the drawing. I'll treasure it. Promise? Her voice was small. Promise. The situation, as it turned out, was exactly what his mother had warned about. Jun Seok arrived at his office to find Sung-ho pacing, anxiety written across every movement. The Chen family knows about the woman and her daughter. Ice flooded Jun Seok's veins. How? Does it matter? They know. And they're threatening to use them as leverage unless we renegotiate our business agreements. Which means they want better terms. They want us to concede advantages. They want to undermine everything you negotiated, and they're using your connection to the Coleman family to do it. Jun Seok moved to the window overlooking Koreatown. Below, life continued. His community going about their business, the world he'd spent 20 years building and protecting. And somewhere across the city, in a shabby apartment, a woman and her daughter slept peacefully because he'd chosen to help. "Set up a meeting," he said finally, "with the Chen family tomorrow." "Boss, if you give in to this, I'm not giving in to anything." Jun-seok turned, and Sung-ho actually stepped back at whatever he saw in his eyes. "But I am ending this threat permanently." The meeting took place in neutral territory, a restaurant in Chinatown closed for the occasion. Chen Wei-min sat across from Jun-seok with smug confidence, two of his associates flanking him. "Mr. Baek," Chen smiled, "I'm glad you decided to be reasonable about revising our terms. I'm not here to renegotiate." Jun-seok's voice carried the lethal quiet of a blade sliding from its sheath. "I'm here to clarify something you've apparently misunderstood." Chen's smile faltered. "Is that so? You think you've found leverage, a woman and child I've chosen to help. You think threatening them gives you an advantage." Jun-seok leaned forward, his white shirt impeccable, 4 buttons undone, the traditional dragon tattoo on his neck visible, a deliberate choice. "But you've made a critical error." "What error?" "You've assumed I'll choose business interests over protecting them. You're wrong, I'll choose them over any deal." Silence. Chen's expression shifted from smug to uncertain. "If you or anyone connected to you approaches Mireya Coleman or her daughter Iris," Jun-seok continued, his tone conversational but his intent unmistakable, "I will make it my personal mission to ensure your family loses everything. Not through violence, through every legal avenue, every business connection, every resource at my disposal. I'll dedicate myself completely to dismantling your interests, and I'll do it methodically enough that you'll never recover." "You're bluffing. Your father would never—" "My father doesn't make my decisions." Jun-seok stood. "The agreements we signed stand. You get exactly what we agreed to, not a fraction more. And the Coleman family remains completely off limits. Those are my terms. They're non-negotiable. You have 10 seconds to agree, or this conversation becomes our last cooperative one." Chen Wei-min stared at him, calculation racing behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded once. "Understood." "Good." Jun-seok headed for the door, then paused. "And Chen, if you're wondering whether I'm serious about dedicating all my resources to protecting a woman and child I barely know, I am. Absolutely. Test me and find out." That night, Jun-seok drove to South Philly. He didn't knock on apartment 3C. He simply sat in his car, watching the windows, ensuring they were safe. Ensuring his choice, the one that might cost him his family's approval, his position, everything, was at least protecting what it needed to protect. His phone buzzed. A message from Iris, sent from Mireya's number. "Thank you for the groceries. Mama made Korean food from your recipes. It was really good. Come for dinner next time." Jun-seok looked at the drawing on his passenger seat, the rainbow above the car, the little girl, the man who stopped. Maybe some choices weren't about power at all. Maybe they were about becoming someone worthy of a child's trust. He texted back, "I'd like that." 6 months later, Jun-seok stood in apartment 3C, now 5B, in a better building, one with working locks and heat that didn't cost extra. The upgrade had been Mireya's idea, paid for with money she'd saved from not having medical bills. She'd insisted on signing the lease herself, on maintaining her independence, even as she accepted his continued help. Iris sat at the kitchen table, her homework spread out, occasionally asking him questions about math that made him remember his own childhood. Mireya moved around the kitchen, preparing dinner, Korean stew she'd learned to make, though she added her own Louisiana twist that made it entirely unique. His father hadn't spoken to him in 3 months. His mother called occasionally, brief conversations that carried the weight of things left unsaid. Jiwoo visited sometimes, curious about the family that had made her brother choose differently. Jun-seok had lost something in his choice, the certainty of his father's approval, the simplicity of clear boundaries, the safety of tradition. But as Iris laughed at something in her textbook, as Mireya smiled at him over her shoulder with warmth that had slowly replaced wariness, he realized he'd gained something too. Not redemption, not exactly. But perhaps the first steps toward becoming the man a terrified child had seen in him that rainy night, someone who didn't drive away, who didn't turn his back, who chose compassion over comfort when it mattered most. "Dinner's ready," Mireya announced. "Jun-seok, you staying?" He looked at Iris's hopeful face, At the table set for 3 at this fragile family formed not by blood but by choice. "Yes," he said, "I'm staying."